Everyone who's played Pathologic has had to deal with the game's clunky and difficult combat system. Lots of people even rack up way too many deaths from just fighting alone, but I'm here to tell you fighting is easy. In this video, I'll be going over way too much information concerning everything there has to do with fighting, such as weapons, enemies, stealth, fighting strategies, and I'll even walk you through how best to handle scripted combat situations such as the Termitary, Abattoir, and protecting Ruben. Now let's start with the basics. Artemy has two types of attacks, light attacks and heavy attacks. Light attacks can be performed by pressing the right trigger on your controller, or if you're on PC, left click. Heavy attacks can be performed by holding down the attack button. Light attacks are fast, use little stamina, and can be blocked by opponents. Oftentimes, I won't bother with light attacks at all, as I find in most situations a heavy or stealth attack would be better. Most fights could end in just a few heavy or stealth hits, but when using purely light attacks, fights will last longer than they should and you'll end up taking damage. On the other hand, heavy attacks take slightly longer to perform, but they deal more damage, break enemy blocks, stagger enemies, and use more stamina, specifically about a third of your stamina bar. Heavy attacks are certainly the way to go. Since they stagger enemies, you can queue up multiple heavy attacks in a row, and doing this can result in a win before your opponent even has a chance to strike at all. Alternatively, while the enemy is staggered, you could use those few seconds to block and regain stamina to use for the rest of the fight. Speaking of blocking, Artemy can also block by holding left trigger on controller or by holding left click on PC. Blocking will negate damage from opponents' light attacks, and they'll lessen damage from enemy blades. Blocking while in a combat situation will cause stamina to recover quickly, but holding a block for too long will cause an enemy to kick you, which recovers your stamina, breaks your guard, leaves you vulnerable to attacks, and prevents you from performing any attack until Artemy recovers. Another tool in Artemy's disposal is Stealth. Stealth can be triggered by holding C on PC or by holding X or square on Xbox or PlayStation. When in stealth, your screen will dim and Artemy will walk slowly. Walking around in stealth will limit the chances of being spotted by people. Usually, you won't be spotted unless you're within a few feet of someone's direct line of sight. Stealth is great for either avoiding enemies or starting combat encounters. Hitting someone while in stealth will perform a move similar to a heavy attack. This stealth attack will deal more damage than a heavy and it'll stun, so if you have the opportunity to, start every fight with a stealth attack for the upper hand. The last thing you can use in combat are weapons. Artemy can use 3 different firearms and 7 different melee weapons. Everything we covered so far can be applied to all melee weapons. You can block, perform heavy attacks and light attacks, and stealth attacks, but none of these things can be performed with any gun. Weapons are fairly simple. Make sure they're properly maintained and point them in the direction of someone you don't like. Maintenance is very important when it comes to firearms, as the lower its durability, the more likely it is to jam. When it comes to melee weapons, they'll just do less and less damage until they break. I recommend always keeping any gun you're using in near perfect condition, but with melee, personally, I don't think it's as important. I find that in most fights I can handle it using fists alone, but keeping any melee weapon equipped can always be helpful. Also, something to keep in mind when using melee weapons is that using them to perform stealth attacks will cause that weapon's durability to decrease way more than with regular use. Now that we've covered the basics of combat, let's get into more general strategies. First of all, the best thing to do in absolutely any combat situation is run. When you understand what you're doing, fighting can be simple, but ultimately this game wasn't made for you to be brawling with everyone you see. Every fight you partake in is a huge risk, which is exactly why, and say it with me, you should run. Run into more than one enemy absolutely anywhere, you should run. See an enemy pick up a knife, you should run. If you hear combat music start playing with no enemy in sight, you should run. But how exactly should you be running, and where should you be running to? Well, to begin with, it's important to identify when exactly you're in danger. Sometimes you can see an enemy before combat starts, but plenty of times, someone will aggro onto you from somewhere out of sight. Listening for audio cues will help you out here. Anytime combat starts, this music will play. And if you're being attacked by a bandit, you'll hear the dread-inducing, "Hey you."
Hey, you.
Whenever you're in a dangerous situation, I recommend always saving half of your stamina bar just in case you run into anyone. Alternatively, if you know there's distance between you and your attacker, you could always block to regain stamina, then make a dash for it. Or if you find yourself already in a fight and are looking for a way out, you could purposefully hold a block and get kicked. Since being kicked resets your stamina and you can't attack for a small period of time, this provides a great opportunity to turn around and run. If you find yourself running away, make sure you have any weapons holstered and your fists put away, as holding anything out and running will severely slow you down. The same can be said for completely draining your stamina when you run. When your stamina bar is nearly empty, you'll see the text turn red. If you continue to sprint while this text is red, you'll move slower than your normal walk speed. If you ever see your stamina text turn red, stop running and let it recharge. It's best if you treat the stamina bar as shorter than it actually is to avoid this at all costs. So, you've seen an enemy or just escaped a combat situation. Now where should you be running to? Whenever you enter a dangerous district, you should always scan for places to run in case of an emergency. The best places to run in this situation is anywhere you don't see enemies, to a wandering guard, the end of a district, or into the closest home or store. At the ends of most districts will usually be two guards who will happily fight any bandits chasing you. But if you don't think you'll make it or someone else is blocking your way, the next best option is to go into someone's home. Entering and exiting any building will provide some breathing room and time to plan out your next steps. If you end up ducking into a burned home, I recommend just waiting at the entrance for a few seconds while your aggressor walks away. This way, you won't run into any further trouble inside. When walking in dangerous districts, I suggest not taking any shortcuts and to stick to the road. Shortcuts can be tight and you don't want to end up in a dead end or getting pinned. That's all I've got for defensive maneuvers, so now it's time to go on the offense. Let's start with some general fighting tips and then I'll get into some strategies. Ideally, if you're choosing to fight someone, this someone should be unarmed and alone. It goes without saying that if your opponent has any kind of weapon or has anyone to back them up, then they are way more dangerous and should be avoided. To avoid getting jumped, if you have the opportunity to, scout out the area before making any moves. You should be thinking things like, if I attack this bandit, are there others in the area who might jump in? If I attack this guard, am I prepared to handle the other guard right next to him? Or if I punch someone in this house, are there any men who might come to their defense? That being said, this is the last time I'll say anything about running away or things being dangerous, because as I've said at the beginning of the video, I think fighting is easy, and I want to teach you how to master it. So, combat tips. It's always best to have full stamina and health. Although this isn't necessary, having a full stamina or health bar can make the fight easier and can take one less thing off your mind in a hectic situation. As soon as you decide you want to fight, take the time to drink a bottle of water or use a bandage. You should always try to get the first hit on your opponent. Chances are, a fight will start with an enemy spotting you and running towards you. You can always land the first hit by walking towards the enemy and landing a hit just as you reach each other. Doing this will guarantee an upper hand or even a quick victory. Never stand still. In any fight, you always want to keep moving, usually backwards and with your eyes on your opponent. This allows you to again connect hits just as an enemy reaches you and gives you a safe opportunity to regain stamina. Oh, and it'll also cause enemies to miss some attacks. You should always keep an eye on your stamina bar. Fighting is often just a balancing act of stamina and performing the right moves at the right time. You don't want to end up trying to perform a heavy attack with no stamina, or continue blocking for too long after your stamina recharges. Next, use weapons accordingly. If caught off guard or being attacked by multiple people, don't fight with your fists. Use a gun or something sharp to dispatch some of, if not all of them. When I find myself being chased by two or more people, or almost anyone with a knife, I often pull out a weapon to quickly kill the closest person. Then I'll switch to fists now that it's even. Now, let's get into some strategies. As I mentioned before, heavy attacks are the way to go. There's absolutely no reason to use light attacks. Even if you might be worried about accidentally killing someone you want to spare, most of the time, attacking head-on with heavy attacks will result in them surrendering before you deal too much damage. That said, although most of the time you'll be throwing heavy punches, there are three main ways you can approach any combat situation: guns blazing, heavy spamming, and stealth. I kind of mentioned heavy spamming already, so let's go over that first. Simply put, spamming heavy attacks will guarantee a quick fight with little to no damage taken on your part, although there is kind of a dance that goes with performing it. Heavy spamming can be boiled down to watching your stamina, backing up, and timing attacks. As you always should, try to get the first hit in by timing your heavy attack just as you and your opponent reach each other. Then, follow it up by continuously holding and letting go of the attack button. Doing this will queue up another heavy attack while you're already in the animation of one. If this is done correctly, you should have landed 3 back-to-back hits and your stamina is empty. Similar to how you should never run on a red stamina bar, you should also never try to attack during this. Now block and continuously back up until your stamina refills. While blocking, try to keep your opponent visible as much as possible. Now, just repeat. Spam 3 heavy hits, and block, and then back up. Sounds easy, right? You can use this technique to solve almost any fighting situation, even enemies with knives won't be as scary. Now let's talk about approaching combat with stealth. It's best to approach combat using stealth if your opponent already has their back turned toward you, if your opponent is not hostile yet, or if you know exactly where an enemy is, such as in a scripted combat situation. This is going to be quite similar to heavy spamming, but with stealth attacks instead. First, get behind your target. If the person you're fighting isn't hostile yet, this will be extremely easy, but if they're not yet, you're going to have to slowly stealth walk until you reach them. Once you're behind them, keep hitting them without letting go of the stealth button until you're out of stamina. Then block still again while holding the stealth button until you have just enough to attack again. Then rinse and repeat. Pulling this off correctly will have you stunning your opponent just long enough to block for stamina and attack again. And since you're constantly in stealth and stunning them, the person doesn't even know you're behind them, so they won't put up any fight at all. This technique will work on just about any NPC you can get the drop on. And now the last way to approach combat, guns blazing. This one mostly speaks for itself. As long as you have a firearm and ammo or even a sharp weapon, you can mow down your enemies with ease. But doing so comes with a few factors to think about. Do you have enough ammo? Do you have the ability to repair your weapons? Or could you handle the situation in a more cost-effective way? Using a weapon is the easy way out. I recommend only using weapons if you're caught off guard or if there's more than one person. Now that you know how to fight, let's go over how to handle two situations you may often find yourself in. Let's start with something which might happen often. What should you do if combat starts with your opponent getting the first hit in? Chances are they'll keep throwing light attacks, which stops you from charging up a heavy attack. What you want to do in this situation is hold block and heavy attack when there's an opening, such as when your opponent misses or if you block a hit. As soon as one of these things happen, hit him with a heavy attack, then you can heavy spam like normal. Next up, how should you deal with two people attacking you at once? Two people can be solved by killing one with a weapon and handling the other with heavy attacks. But that's the easy way, and weapons may not always be an option. Handling two people with your fists is no simple task. You're gonna have a hard time not losing health. But if you must, you should use a strategy similar to heavy spamming. If your opponent is farther than the other, you could heavy spam like normal, but if they're close to each other, what you're gonna want to do is alternate attacks. When they get close enough for you to land an attack on one of them, land a heavy on one, then instead of continuously hitting the same person, hit the other, so that you quickly stun both of them. Then back off and repeat. If you're feeling confident, or if you're quick enough, you could throw in a third or fourth hit. Again, alternating to stun them. If you're facing more than two people, then regular attacks are thrown out the window and you will absolutely need a weapon. So now we've covered almost everything you should know about combat. Next, I'd like to go over how to best handle each enemy type. Let's start with the townsfolk. Women and children will never fight and will instead run away in dangerous situations. The only exception to this is the older male kids. If provoked or if they witness you attacking a fellow townsperson, they will come to their aid just like any other male townsperson. These kids can be dispatched easily with a few heavy attacks, but if you're ever deciding to attack someone innocent, you should still consider them to be a threat. Like I mentioned, every adult male will jump to help anyone innocent you decide to attack, but they won't bother to help guards. If you'd like to attack a man or just about any non-hostile townsperson, it's best to go with the stealth strategy. Just walk behind them, activate stealth, and attack. But seeing as hurting just about anyone will call upon anyone else nearby to assist, it's important to scout the area, otherwise you might find yourself overwhelmed. The same goes for attacking innocent people in a building as well. You'll need to check all floors for possible threats before you attack anyone, otherwise people will rush downstairs into the room you're in. If you do find yourself being chased by a mob, you can either leave the area or start blasting. To finish off non-hostile townspeople, let's talk about the guards. Guards will again assist anyone in need of help, but only other guards will come to their aid. Singular guards can be found wandering the streets, but more often you'll find them in groups of 2 at the entrances of districts. Singular guards are easy to deal with stealth, whereas sets of guards can be either handled using heavy attacks or by killing one with a weapon to make the fight easier. Now let's move on to hostile NPCs. These are your standard bandits, infected people, and arsonists. You'll run into bandits just about everywhere at night, and even more in burn districts. These guys will almost always carry a knife, making them a big threat. If you're fighting a bandit one-on-one, then heavy spamming is the way to go. Even if they have a knife, if you perform this correctly, you shouldn't get hurt. In any other situation, you're gonna want a gun. If you run into more than one of them, keep shooting until it's more manageable. And if you're exploring a burned home, keep your gun or melee weapon out at all times and be prepared to attack at any moment. Infected people are similar to women and children in that they should never be attacked. If you're facing someone infected head on, they'll continuously hit you with bursts of immunity damage. Infected people also have a very high resistance to fist attacks, so they'll tank a lot of heavy hits. If for some reason you want to kill an infected person, try your best to go with stealth. When you're in stealth and behind an infected person, they won't spread any disease. Otherwise, if you need to or if you're in an infected house, you can go with any kind of weapon to get rid of them quickly. Next, we've got Arsonists. Arsonists will only attack you if you're infected. If you find yourself infected with an Arsonist looking at you, you're going to want to run, but not away from them. As long as you're not in melee distance, they will continuously chuck Molotovs at you. When you close the distance, they'll try backing off and they'll switch to melee. When an Arsonist first starts attacking, start sprinting and strafe left and right until you get close enough to fight. Then, a few heavy attacks will do him in. Finally, the last type of enemies you'll come across are the army soldiers. These guys will only appear after day 9. Soldiers can be found wandering the streets of all districts and in groups of 2 at district entrances. They will also always carry a rifle. If you attack a soldier, you won't have to worry about townspeople, since the only people to assist a soldier in combat will be another soldier. Wandering soldiers can be killed using the stealth method, but they will take a lot of hits before dying. If for some reason you can't kill a soldier with stealth, then you could go with heavy attacks. But this method doesn't work as well on them. Like arsonists, if there's space between the two of you, the soldier will ready their weapon and fire. But if you quickly close the distance, they'll switch to trying to bash you with their rifle. As you may have expected, if you want to fight more than one soldier at a time, you're gonna need a weapon. And lastly, you might run into an army flamethrower. Flamers will spawn only in infected districts and are only an issue if you're infected or if you attack a nearby soldier. These guys move quite slowly, but they do have some range on the flamethrowers. And I know I said I wouldn't say anything else about running from combat, but with flamethrowers, it's a must. Even if you do avoid the flames or get close enough to throw heavy attacks, or even if you stealth attack as much as possible, it will be impossible to kill them, since they have a whopping 10,000 health. For some context, a regular guard has 98, and a standard soldier has 100, and your heavy attacks deal 30 damage with stealth dealing 40. You would have to hit this guy 334 times using heavy attacks to kill him. It's just not worth the time and energy. To end off the video, next I'm going to go over scripted combat situations and how best to handle them. You might have noticed that I didn't cover how best to handle Odongs. That's because Odongs are only ever found in the events I'm going to cover in this section, so it just made more sense to leave it here. I'm going to cover these events as they happen chronologically in-game, so keep in mind there may be spoilers. With that out of the way, let's start with the first scripted combat encounter on day 4. On day 4, eventually a messenger will tell you that your house is being robbed. At Isidore's house, you'll be tasked with killing 4 looters, 1 outside the house and 3 inside. When you approach the building, the first looter will speak with you. Make sure you don't say anything to provoke him. Then, you can just walk behind and stealth kill him. The next enemy will be in the room on your left as you enter. I think this might depend on if you opened or closed the door the last time you were here, but when you enter, you'll get immediately attacked. This guy can be stealth killed as well, but you're gonna have to activate and hold the stealth button as you enter the building. As long as you're in stealth, his back will be turned and you could kill him easily. The next guy will be in the room immediately on your left as you walk up the stairs. He'll also have his back turned, so as you come up the stairs, go into stealth and you could deal with him easy as well. The last enemy here will be impossible to stealth kill. He'll be in the second to last room upstairs and he'll be facing the door you come through. For one-on-one fights, you can't go wrong with heavy spamming. Just be mindful of the building's layout when you're backing up. The next scripted event will be at the very beginning of day 5. Here, you'll be tasked with protecting Ruben from 4 Odongs. There are multiple ways to deal with this quest, but I'll be going over efficiently killing all 4 of them. After you exit Ruben's warehouse, you'll come face to face with the first Odong. As you get close, you'll be brought into dialogue with him, and no matter how you end the conversation, he will attack you. To deal with him, we'll have to use heavy attacks. Odongs can be tough and deadly, but if you've mastered heavy spamming, this guy should be easy. As you leave the area in front of Ruben's warehouse, on the left, past Grief's warehouse, will be the next Odong standing against a fence. This one can be dealt with even easier using stealth. To get behind him, activate stealth and hug the buildings on the right until you're past him. Then, just get close and you know what to do. The last two Odongs are located in these two spots, and attacking one will always trigger the other. I recommend killing one with a weapon and then using heavies on the last. At the very beginning of day 6, you'll be tasked with protecting Ruben again. This time, you'll have to deal with 3 men all at once. Like the first time protecting Ruben, this quest can be handled in a few ways, but we'll be killing them. This time, you're gonna want weapons. If you have one available, use a gun to kill 2 of them. Otherwise, a blade is your next best choice. When you arrive, don't provoke them in conversation and you can get around them to get in a better position. If you have a gun, back up as much as you like and line up a headshot. If you're using a blade, you can start the fight with stealth attack, but if you're using melee, you're probably gonna take quite a lot of damage. Alternatively, it really is best to deal with the situation in a less confrontational way. Next up on the scripted events list is solving the schism at the Termitary. You can gain access to this on day 7 after you give or don't give the Vlads to the kin. And you can solve the schism peacefully, but we love violence here. To solve the schism, we'll need to kill 4 Odongs. If you follow exactly what I do, we can fight each Odong one-on-one easily. To start off, we want to enter the Termitary from the side entrance and take the stairs up until you find a set of doors open. In the next room will be the first Odong with his back turned, so this guy can be stealth killed. Once he's dealt with, exit the room into the main chamber and go left into the corner and wait here. Killing the first Odong will alert another on the top floor to come down the stairs. In the opposite corner will be the third Odong, which we don't want to trigger until we're ready. So just wait for the second Odong to come all the way to you, then just heavy spam them. When you're ready, go to the opposite corner and deal with number 3. The last Odong should be at the very top floor, so walk up slowly until you spot them. When you do, run away and get off the stairs to a safe position, then heavy spam as usual and the schism is solved. The next combat situation will take place on day 8. On this day, Grief will ask you to lock up his warehouse, and to do so, you'll need to kill Barley the Barber and 2 of his thugs. Fighting 3 guys at once in a confined space may seem scary, but this can be cheesed really easily. If you stand on top of the table by the cabinet, none of the enemies will be able to hurt you, and you could land heavy hits whenever you feel comfortable. If you want to do this in a more legit way, you could shoot Barley from afar and let the other 2 guys funnel into your gunfire. Or you could start with some stealth attacks on Barley, but if you're going to go with melee, you're going to take a lot of damage. And now for the last scripted combat encounter, the scariest part of the entire game, the abattoir. Well, you'll have to kill 5 Odongs without any items in your inventory. Of course, when you make it about a third of the way through, you could get a Menku's finger, but it's entirely possible to kill all 5 hitless using only Artemis fists. Time freezes while you're in the abattoir, and the game saves at the entrance, so don't worry about taking all the time you need. The first chamber you come across houses a singular Odong. This one can be stealth killed. When you first see the room, peek around the corner and activate stealth. As he moves around the pillar here, move in for the attack. After you exhaust your stamina, he's probably going to punch forward. Try not to panic and move in quickly to attack or he'll detect you. As you approach the area with the herb brides and plague clouds, you should see another Odong blocking the path ahead. This one and the rest will have a short walk cycle where they'll walk to the end of a path and turn around and repeat it. Watch the pattern and move in for a stealth attack when you feel comfortable. The next two will be too close to each other to solo stealth kill. Treat the next Odong the same as the others up until you see the fourth start to get close. Since you really shouldn't fight two Odongs at once, we're going to turn around and run back until they stop chasing us. Once they've de-aggroed, they'll walk back to their positions and you can land a few more stealth attacks as their backs are turned. Of course, this will trigger Odong number 4 again, so you might have to repeat this a few times until both of them are dead. The last Odong will be blocking the entrance to the big pit chamber. I'm sure you already know what we're going to do here. Wait for his back to turn and stealth.
Learn to behold deeply. All is filled with meaning. Things big and small.
And there it is. That's how you can best handle the abattoir. It is going to require some patience, and if you haven't mastered stealth, it might even take a few reloads. With that, this wraps up every combat situation a game forces you into, and this wraps up everything I have to tell you about combat in this game. Hopefully, I was able to teach you a thing or two, and hopefully, you won't view combat as scary or stressful to deal with. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.